Okay, so welcome everybody to this closing session. I see that I already have the same problem with the first one, but I've already corrected it. So it will be okay with what I was going to say. Patrick van der Voort used to make fun of me because I'm always quoting philosopher or scientist, and I will never stop doing this. So Patrick, it's about Darwin quote. This time Darwin has explained us that it's not the strongest species that survives, but not either the most intelligent. And I'm proud of that being the most intelligent one, but the ones who are most responsive to changes. And so I realized that I'm having some difficulties to adapt to change, but now it's getting a little better, and the echo is off after only 5 seconds, so I'm pretty okay. So welcome all of you for this closing session, but this is not already finished. I feel that what I was going to say is that I have been amazed during this day by the high quality of this Congress. And I feel that it is the best one we have ever had. And apart from next year's Congress, because it was in Liège and I was so proud of it, I feel that the only thing that was better in that Congress was the party. But for the quality of the program, I'm pretty sure that this one is really the best we ever had. And speaking of which, I have to introduce you next speaker. Next keynote speaker is Ross Fisher. And I feel that I will let him introduce himself because this is the best way to do it. So it's up to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. That's very kind of you. It's nice to introduce yourself without hearing things that you don't believe about yourself. My name is Ross Fisher. I'm a consultant pediatric surgeon. That's right, I'm a pediatric surgeon. I'm not an emergency or disaster medicine specialist. I work in pediatric surgery in Sheffield Children's Hospital in the United Kingdom. So most of you will now be wondering why on earth I am speaking to you. And the reason I'm speaking to you is I want to talk about the imposter phenomenon. I am an imposter speaking to you guys. So here's some thoughts. How we manage patients has a direct impact on their outcome. That's obvious. How we think about how we manage patients has a more major impact on their outcome than you might think. 4 months ago, I was undertaking an open biopsy on a horrible pelvic tumor in a 2-year-old child. The initial incision into the tumor brought about prompt and significant hemorrhage. You know, that sort of hemorrhage. I quickly got control with direct pressure, repositioned the registrar, told the anaesthetist, and waited 3 minutes with direct pressure. It's amazing how that can actually make a difference. I looked under the swab, more immediate and prompt hemorrhage. Quickly got control again, alerted the anaesthetist that there was a significant bleed, suggested that we would need blood and to consider the major hemorrhage protocol. I asked for flow seal, vascular clamps, a different suction device, and to contact a senior surgical colleague in the department. We applied the flow seal, pressed, and waited. So when we looked again after 5 minutes, it was more controllable, but still significant bleeding. I tried lateral point pressure, I tried hemostatic sutures, all made a bit of a difference, but still not enough. More direct pressure. After discussion amongst the team, the vessel was ligated laterally, further flow seal, more pressure, we achieved hemostasis. The blood loss was only about 3 swabs, which is quite a bit in a 2-year-old, but well done, said the anaesthetist. Unrequested, 3 days following this, my registrar sent me his own portfolio reflection on the case. What he wrote about the structured approach, the performance relative to the increasing challenges of that hemorrhage, I did not recognize as my work. That wasn't how it had happened. in my head. There was nothing written about the panic, about the self-criticism, about the failing to get immediate control, about causing it in the first place, about how if Sean had been there, he would have done it differently, or how lucky I had been in the end to stop the bleeding. I mean, the kid nearly died. Or had I just been overreacting? This is the imposter phenomenon. Not a syndrome, it's a phenomenon. It's a false belief that even although success has occurred, that success is undeserved, or that success itself would have been achieved by anyone else if they were there. Metacognition, as you've heard earlier in the day, is the thinking about one's own thinking. The imposter phenomenon is a failure of that metacognition. I tell you this story because the scientific literature would have us understand that 70% of all of us, 70% of you, experience the imposter phenomenon to some degree on a very regular basis. The phenomenon is equally expressed across those who identify as male or female and has a significant impact on the function of teams and outcome for the patients in emergency medicine, disaster medicine, and pediatric surgery. 70% of us have flawed thinking about how we think about how we manage patients. I'll say that again, not to patronize you, but to make it clear. 70% of us have flawed thinking about how we think about how we manage patients. Now, the literature, and there's a lot of it, identifies 5 basic types of the imposter phenomenon. First, there's the perfectionist, who has to get everything 100% right 100% of the time. If they don't, they feel that they will be found out. But that's often couched in the suggestion that that's what the patient deserves, after all. Then there's the expert. They believe that the only way to avoid being found out is to continue to study, get qualifications and degrees, so that if their position is challenged, they will be more strongly believed as not being an imposter because of their qualifications. Some imposters don't understand how they've arrived at this exalted position. They never really had to study hard or try hard. It just appears to come naturally to them. Their underlying fear, however, is that the limit of that natural ability will be breached, and soon, and they'll be discovered. The soloist has to do everything themselves because asking for help or even expressing weakness would highlight their lack of ability. And lastly, there's the superhero who just never stops. They're all day and all night because they believe if they're not, that is when the bad will happen. Now, it's important to reiterate that this imposter phenomenon is due to a wrong view of self-thinking and that occurs in those who've achieved their tasks, but they believe that that achievement itself is unjustified. The issues of that sort of behavior are clear. Of course, there is value in aiming for that perfection of the perfectionist, except that perfection is never achievable, so all that it brings is failure. Qualifications do not deliver expertise themselves any more than the lack of qualifications obstructs that excellence of care. Failure is not indicative, but ubiquitive. That means it affects everyone, and we must accept that. We work together better in teams rather than as soloists. And lastly, unless you do come from the planet Krypton, or you may have been bitten by a radioactive spider, superhumans are just human, and they are just about to break. Then, of course, there's you. Because you, and to be honest, so do I, in our imposter phenomenon state, we have managed to reject each one of those stereotypes because they don't quite fit, or because they're all true. And that just proves to us that we alone are a true imposter. For us, it's not a phenomenon, it's true. And the difficulty there, of course, is that true imposters don't believe that they are imposters. So what about the fact that you may not actually be as good as you think you are? You're not an imposter. You're actually a little bit poor at what you do. Now, there's a seminal piece of research on this issue published in 1999, asking individuals to assess their own abilities at simple cognitive tasks and then testing those abilities to compare the two results. Kruger and Dunning identified this concept that has now become quite popular and carries their name. Their research identified an issue of false metacognition, where individuals believe that their natural skills are not the same as their tested skills. They are unaware of the true nature of their knowledge or skill. And the title of that paper is Unskilled and Unaware. Now, the impact of this so-called Dunning-Kruger issue is that individuals will undertake tasks and make decisions based on their internal assessment of their own ability, not the external, tested, and true assessment of their ability. You can see how that will affect things. And when they are challenged on the disparity of that or its effects, the individuals are unable to assess that their assessment is incorrect, and they challenge not that evidence, but the validity of the test showing it. Now, this work has been extended across multiple and disparate abilities and multiple tasks in multiple professions, including medicine. And it's clear that the Dunning-Kruger phenomena is a further issue of false metacognition. You might call it meta-ignorance. We don't know what we don't know. Now, there's extended work that encouragingly demonstrates that if you have targeted education in the area of that ignorance, it improves the performance of the candidate, and importantly, also their perception of the quality of their performance relative to others. Now, the impact of this metacognitive problem in the workplace is obvious, and many of us are aware of clear examples of this around us. Staff who are unskilled and aware of that lack of skill. These individuals are also in the public view. Now, that might be in the current political or epidemiological climate, individuals who offer opinions and make decisions that their level of expertise does not support. The impact of that ignorance within high-functioning teams such as ours is clearly counterproductive to efficiency and ultimately to the patient outcome. It must be addressed because how we think about how we manage patients has a major impact on practice. Now, my extended research on this has led me to a delicious point. Beyond the basic concept, I'm sure that there are many members of the audience who are aware of the famous Dunning-Kruger graph, Mount Stupid and all that stuff. Some of you are aware of the Nobel Prize for this work. Others will have a deeper knowledge, perhaps that the phenomenon may be explained by the statistical concept of regression towards the mean, or that a mathematical model demonstrated the original results were potentially just from chance, or even that the Dunning-Kruger test is a compulsory part of Swedish Air Force recruitment. Some of you may never even have heard of Dunning-Kruger. What we are all describing, though, in accepting those is ignorance. The graph that you think is true comes from a comic book, not from the journal. It was the humorous Ig Nobel Prize, not the Nobel Prize, that was awarded. The regression towards the mean, mathematical models, they have all been disproven, and there is no Dunning-Kruger test for the Swedish Air Force. How many of you justify your defense of these facts from other reasons? But let me ask you, have you actually read the article? All we are demonstrating in that is that we are Dunning-Kruger, unskilled and unaware. And please, before you leap to your defense any further, When I described individuals with Dunning-Kruger, in our mind's eye we saw them. Unfortunately, we are wrong again there. Dunning-Kruger is about assessing this person, not assessing others. It's a failure of our metacognition. We are, if you like, Dunning-Kruger about Dunning-Kruger. Now, by that slight trickery, what I've proven to you is the issue of your ignorance regarding Dunning-Kruger. And the elephant in the room is that this concept of not being able to accurately identify the extent or otherwise of our knowledge, abilities, or performance has repeatedly been shown in research to affect every aspect of our life, and therefore medical practice and performance. We are all points on that true Dunning-Kruger graph. Importantly, we're not all at the bottom, especially you, because you believe you're the imposter. You're not. We are unaware of the true extent of our knowledge or skills, and this will directly affect how we think about how we manage patients and their outcome. What imposter phenomenon and Dunning-Kruger show us is that we all have issues of false metacognition. We therefore cannot rely on our own view of what has happened. It's incomplete and biased. Not necessarily wrong, but not completely correct. So then, how can we know what we don't know? Now, this is not merely a philosophical discussion to carry out in the bar with a pint of beer. It's actually essential to our practice and improvement. I think the simple answer is to ask someone else. In performance, that asking someone else is called feedback. And good feedback is designed not for criticism or to catch the imposter, but to highlight areas for improvement that we may all know more about our ignorance, and then to redirect our metacognition towards performance improvement. Now, there are three basic types of feedback: appreciation, evaluation, and coaching. Returning to my original story, the feedback in terms of appreciation was the simple, "Well done," I received from the anaesthetist. Sometimes that's all that's required, particularly in the acute phase. What I received from my registrar, albeit unknowingly, was evaluation of my performance, what I actually did. The third and most important aspect of coaching, of feedback, is coaching. And that's designed to deal with the metacognition. What did I think about the performance? This is to develop an understanding beyond the what of evaluation to the why underlying that. Now, most people don't enjoy feedback. That's because many of us have had bad experience of it, and mostly we would avoid doing something like that, even if we know it's valuable and even if we know it's for improvement. And that's a bit crazy. The reasons for that, though, are not crazy, but most likely to include the fact that many of us have issues of false metacognition. Our fear is that feedback will highlight gaps in our knowledge and performance, that we're not expert, that we're not perfect, that we're not natural or as good as everyone else, or whatever other wrong thinking we have, and then we will be exposed. What that means is that for coaching to be effective, its nature and purpose must be clarified, instigated and led not by the coach, but by the performer. It must be in a place of safety, and it must only be for performance improvement, not assessment. I think one of the best approaches to coaching is a conversation based in what I call curious inquiry, if you like, asking the why of the already assessed performance, and continuing to do so on a deeper and deeper level, accepting the direction of the conversation taken not by the assessor, but by the performer, if you like. So you managed that successfully. Can you run through why you did what you did? I saw that you asked for the major hemorrhage protocol to be activated. That was before there was major hemorrhage. Why was that? You were surprised that your approach was successful. Why were you surprised? The answer to those questions will elicit a different response in different people because of our own personal metacognition. And the coach needs to be able to sensitively allow that conversation to explore those particular issues and determine their nature, the extent of the knowledge and the thinking around that. And remember, of course, that in such a conversation, neither the coach nor the performer knows where our weaknesses lie. So now we can see that feedback is highly complex, sensitive, challenging, it sounds unpleasant and impossible. I believe it's actually much more straightforward than that. Once the ethos is established of confidentiality, support, and direction only towards improvement, what should follow then is merely a conversation between two trusted colleagues based in curiosity and support. That conversation will take into the account the thinking of the person receiving it and of the person facilitating it, and that makes it personalized, not about the person, but about a relationship. None of us are imposters, but we do have a flawed view of who we are and how we perform, and that is the imposter phenomenon. None of us know everything. We have a flawed view of what we actually know and don't know. That is Dunning-Kruger. We all have imperfect metacognition, but we can improve that through supportive coaching. How we think about how we manage patients can have a major impact on our patient's outcome. Let's change that. Thank you.
Dear Ross, this was really an impressive talk. I'll let it sink in to people. I think it's a really true story, and it's something we're all struggling, young and old, I think, at during our work and our careers and even life, like you said. We move forward. Unless there are, but I don't see really burning questions, and I think this doesn't need big questions. It is what it is. We move forward with the abstracts. Thank you very much again. We move forward with the abstracts, and I would like Sabine, Mark, and the three top abstract speakers to join in with a video. We had a lot of abstracts for which we were very, very happy, I think. They were of good quality. They will be published in Acta Clinica Belgica. And the top three are now presented here. I'll show the video of each of these abstracts and then move forward with one or two questions of the public or the jury being Sabine de Man from Antwerp and Mark Franks from Charleroi, who will then also eventually decide upon a winner, although you're all three winners, for which we have a small prize. There you go. Seeing Michiel, I will probably start with...
Normally, Dimitri should start with his presentation, I think.
Okay.
So we agreed on before.
Yeah, then you just need to give me a second to open his.
And then Michiel, it would be nice for you to close your video, because otherwise you interfere with Dimitri's. Okay, Dimitri, normally the floor is yours, so go ahead.
So we first show the video.
Good evening. My name is Dimitri Meulaert, and I'm going to talk you through my abstract, the abstract of my study, The Influence of the COVID-19 Pandemic on Suicide-Related Interventions in the Emergency Department. The COVID pandemic, as we all know, originates at the end of 2019 in Wuhan, China. In earlier publications, we see that pandemics, and especially also this COVID-19 pandemic, is associated with distress, anxiety, fear of contagion, depression, and insomnia. When we take a look at those factors, we see that anxiety, distress, depression, and insomnia may contribute to stress-related disorders and suicidality. So it's important to know that there's a decent suicidogenic potential of the COVID-19 crisis. When we take a look at our study, the goal of our study is to measure the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on suicide-related interventions in the emergency department of the Ghent University Hospital. We performed the search in medical files of the emergency department using Dutch and Latin keywords, such as zelfmoord, which means suicide, tentamen, every hit starting with suicide, and verhanging, which means hanging. We defined time slots corresponding to lockdown periods in Belgium. The first lockdown starting at the 18th of March and ending on the 4th of May. And the second lockdown starting at the 19th of October and ending at the 30th of November. Since we're performing the study in December 2020, we're excluding December from our results. This study will compare the incidence of suicide-related interventions of 2019 to 2020. Here we see a table with all our results. First we see the suicide-related interventions, the absolute numbers on top, the absolute numbers of total interventions in the emergency department, and then we see the incidence of suicide-related interventions. At the bottom we see the p-value, and we used a chi-square test to calculate the p-values. Here we see a table of, on the y-axis, the incidence of suicide-related interventions in percentages, and on the x-axis we see the different time slots. Blue means 2019 and the red means 2020. When we take a look at the results, during first lockdown we found a non-significant decrease of suicide-related interventions. During second lockdown we found a non-significant increase of suicide-related interventions when we compare 2020 to 2019. In between lockdown time slots we found a significant decrease of suicide-related interventions. Our results, or the results found in our study, were similar results as found in other publications worldwide. You see no rise or even a fall in suicide rates in the early months of the pandemic, and afterwards you see a later increase of suicide rates. A longer follow-up and multi-center data are essential to estimate the influence of the COVID-19 pandemic on suicide rates. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Dimitri, there is time for 2 questions. So I will look at the Slido, and Patrick, he asked if you have any explanation for the results that you encounter.
Well, there is an explanation to the results we found. It's described in other publications. So the fall in the initial lockdown, in some publications they called it a honeymoon effect, and the honeymoon effect. By the honeymoon effect, they mean that there's some kind of sense of unity between the general public. Like, we've got this, we can handle this. We are well prepared for this pandemic, and we can do this. And in between lockdowns, you also see that people still have that kind of sense of unity. And when the second lockdown hits, people get some kind of disillusioned, because it keeps on going on. And there's a first wave, there's a second wave, and we're on the verge of a third wave. And people get disillusioned, and that kind of honeymoon effect seems to wear off. And we see it in other publications in Japan, in the early stages of the pandemic in Wuhan. We see the same results over and over again. And I extended my, because I excluded December from my initial abstract, I asked to our for more data on December, and you can see that in the month of December, suicide rates really stepped up, and we see a significant increase of suicide-related interventions.
Okay. Also, Willem asked if you can explain or share some more information about the successful attempts. What do you mean by that?
Well, we did not differentiate between successful suicidal events, like people really deceased in their attempt, or really succeed in their attempt of suicide. We just took suicide-related events, like all interventions, whether they resulted in death or not. We included them in our study.
And did you also see an increase and a decrease in the total amount of psychiatric consults or not?
Well, if we can, there's a big link between psychological distress and suicide-related admissions in the hospital. So I guess the absolute number of psychiatric disease, suicide-related or not, seems to have a big increase.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to keep the timing, we will now introduce the second lecture about evaluation of ethical triage tool in allocation of ICU resource during the pandemic. As you know, BCDM has published ethical guidelines, and we are very interested to get the result of the study.
Hello, my name is Heidi Michielse. I'm a resident in emergency medicine. We performed a study on the use of ethical triage tools in allocation of scarce resources like ICU beds and ventilators in pandemic circumstances. COVID-19 presents new challenges for the current healthcare system worldwide, including limited capacity of ICU beds. That's why many Belgian hospitals individually prepared an ethical triage tool in anticipation of the disaster scenario in which efforts to expand maximal ICU capacity would no longer be sufficient. Such an ETT must be seen as an institutional guideline or internal policy to help support decision-making in allocation of resources in case of scarcity. We compared 3 different ETTs that were designed by 3 different Flemish hospitals early in the pandemic wave, when scientific knowledge on the pathogen was still limited. We studied the impacts of use of ETTs on hospital survival rates. Here you can see the ETTs more in detail. All 3 protocols use the concept of frailty, which is defined as the progressive and widespread physiological decline, which makes a person more susceptible for health stressors. One of the ETTs was even entirely based on this concept and was assessed by using the clinical frailty score. 2 other protocols added significant comorbidities into the algorithm. It's important to know that such an ETT was ready to be implemented at our institution in case of scarcity, but it was never used since ICU capacity turned out not to be threatened during the first pandemic wave. So we compared the ETTs post hoc and determined which patients would have been denied ICU admission according to these protocols if they would have been implemented, and whether there were differences in individuals' triage status across the protocols. Next, we compared in-hospital mortality rates between the currently admitted patient group versus the patients that would have been denied ICU admission. So let's take a look at the results. We included all patients that were admitted at the ICU of Ziekenhuisnetwerk Antwerpen Campus Stuivenberg into the study, regardless of the reason of admission. So there were COVID patients and non-COVID patients, since one single pool of resources had to be shared. A total of 182 patients was admitted from March until the end of May. An application of the protocols would have resulted in 52 patients denied for ICU admission. From this patient subgroup, 52% proved to survive their acute disease episode with ICU care, compared to almost 74% in the would-be approved group. For scientific purposes, we also applied the 3 ETTs on the respiratory insufficient COVID subgroup, and we noticed that hospital survival rate dropped from 52% in the would-be denied group to 25% in case of COVID-19. When taking a closer look to the would-be denied respiratory insufficient COVID patients in need of mechanical ventilation, mortality rate even amounted to 100%. Of course, it's important to know that total mortality rate for the COVID patients was actually very high, 59% versus 21% in the non-COVID subgroup. So although all 3 protocols were designed to weigh the patient's significant comorbidities and estimate the general health status of the patients, they were not able to reliably predict the short-term in-hospital mortality rate and to discriminate adequately between survivors and non-survivors. Also, we noticed that there was very little mutual agreement between the 3 different ETTs, and there was only accordance in 7 cases, leading to the potential undesirable situation in which ICU care would be refused for one patient in one hospital, but would be afforded in another one. So, should we use ethical triage tools? Well, it's important to stress that they were designed as ethical triage tools rather than as scientific medical instruments to predict ICU outcome. We have other instruments for that purpose. And that they were designed to help allocating scarce resources to those group of patients that would reap the most benefit of those resources. So we suggest that these ETTs might be used to define a group of patients that might benefit from ICU care regardless of time limits, versus a group of patients that might be offered an ICU trial, meaning ICU care for a limited period of time after which a reappraisal is made, and treatment is only continued in case of a positive response. And furthermore, in case of COVID-19, it might help discriminating that patient subgroup with a very, very high mortality rate after mechanical ventilation in order to propose a do not intubate policy and opt for maximal non-invasive respiratory support or palliative care as indicated. Thank you for watching and enjoy the Congress.
Thank you, Heidi, for this presentation. I just check if there are questions on Slido, but I don't see up to now. Yes, Alexander, Sasha had a question. Sasha asked if such a triage tool should be balanced with an evaluation of the patient already in the ICU.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Shouldn't such an entrance triage tool be balanced with an evaluation of the patients already in the ICU?
Before admission, make the evaluation? I don't really understand the question, I'm sorry.
Maybe can Sasha put on his microphone to give more detail about what about you would like?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, it's quite obvious because if there's only a triage at the entrance, it's the rule, the first that gets in the bed will have the bed. And then probably you have patients who are staying for 2 or 3 months in the ICU with maybe least chance of survival that the new incoming patients. So don't you believe that there should be also consideration of patients who might sometimes have a withdrawal of their support?
Well,
I mean, it's about, you know, it's about distributive justice.
Well, I think that is indeed very important to make a reappraisal. That's what I mean with the ICU trials. If you see that there is no positive response, treatment must be withheld or further treatment must not be continued. Also, when there are new patients to be admitted, I think we need to reconsider which patient should have the next.
Yeah, sorry, I muted you.
Yeah, thank you. So can you hear me? Were there more questions or?
There is one more question about is patient survival the most appropriate outcome?
About patients surviving?
Is survival the most appropriate outcome?
Oh, no, that's indeed a very important question. It's more like an ethical triage tool. It's not only survival, but the most quality adjusted life years one. And of course, it's like in disaster medicine, we want to have the most people have the most benefit of the allocated resources. It's not only survival, but it's quality of survival, which is very important and must be taken into account. That's something where which is a big responsibility for the whole ICU community, I think, to keep that in mind.
Thank you for your answer. I think that we have to go on with the next abstract, but I see that Sabine as co-moderator has a last question, maybe.
Yes, Hedy, I would like to ask you, in your point of view, who should decide? Because this is an ethical decision. Is it the attending physician or somebody else, or would you like to have a team to do that?
Well, of course, we would like to have a team to do it. I think for frontline medical workers who need to make that terrible decision to decide which patient can have the last ICU bed, it can be useful to have something like a protocol to support that decision making, also to prevent that there is some subjective validation in that decision. And also it can cause moral injury for that person who makes the final decision. Here in Belgium, we're actually not used to refuse people at intensive care. Normally we have a large number of ICU beds per capita, to say, but it's only for now that we are fearing that we don't have enough capacity. So I think it's a shared responsibility, a decision that must be made multidisciplinary by the referring physician, the attending intensivist at the ED, and with
the doctors who know the patient's file the best, for example, a pneumologist for the COPDers or the nephrologists all together.
Thank you very much. Patrick, I think we can continue.
Dear colleagues, I would like to present you a solution for the ventilator surge capacity problem raised in the COVID-19 pandemic. Our group developed a modified ventilator circuit which allows for individualization of ventilation during shared ventilation. We performed a bench testing to test our hypothesis that tidal volumes, PEEP, and the oxygen fraction can be individualized when we have to share a vent. Please feel free to connect with me via LinkedIn. You find a QR code here in the bottom of the left corner. The true bottleneck in the search of critically ill COVID-19 patients is the amount of available ventilators. Shared ventilation with a splitted circuit can be a life-saving when local demand for ventilators exceeds our capacity. But sharing a ventilator implies that we have to match patients with similar characteristics to one ventilator, so-called pairing of patients. In this case, we have to fit these patients to the ventilator. The design of a shared ventilator setup has been published before, like you see here on the image. Briefly, the inspiratory limb of the ventilation circuit is split with a Y-piece, going to each patient. The expiratory limbs are joined together again with a Y-piece prior to their connection to the ventilator. In this setup, each patient gets the exact same delivered pressures, PEEP, and inspiratory oxygen fraction. Why is individualization so important? It's because of the lung injury and the RDS we see with COVID-19. These three parameters are crucial in the management of those patients and to prevent ventilator-induced lung injury. Besides of that, patients are dynamic in time. They improve or get worse, so that the initial pairing of those patients we did isn't sustainable. Therefore, individualized shared ventilation. With ISV, we will fit the ventilator via our adapted ventilator circuit to the patient. This is our modified ventilator circuit. We can individualize tidal volumes via a flow restrictor on the inspiratory limb. We can apply PEEP individually by adding an inline PEEP on the expiratory limb. We can adjust the oxygen fraction by a side stream of oxygen, and we demonstrated this in our bench testing. In this figure, we illustrated that tidal volumes can be individualized. We see that we are able to titrate the delivered tidal volumes between a valve closure of 40 and 70%. With the current flow restrictor we tested in our bench testing, there's a style decay in volumes. This can be improved in the future by designing our own flow restrictor. Extrinsic PEEP could be applied and measured except for the ventilator settings with a very large expiratory time. Here we see that we could adapt the oxygen fraction in circuit A by adding a certain flow of oxygen without significant impact on circuit B. So individualization of the oxygen fraction was possible. Shared ventilation can be individualized with the modifications we did with ISV on the ventilator circuit. Our group did a proof of concept in an in vivo model. This study will also be presented at this BASILIM Congress. We will further develop ISV within the RECIUS project, and the RECIUS project stands for Responding to the Ventilator Surge Capacity Problem Raised in the COVID-19 Crisis, setting by designing individualized shared ventilation. The RECIUS project will help us to fully understand the potential of ISV and their limitations, allow us to design an approved ISV circuit, and develop a clinical protocol for ISV to guide our colleagues when facing a ventilator surge capacity problem. I would like to thank you for your attention and your interest in this topic. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me via LinkedIn or during the social event on this Congress. I would like to thank the Scientific Committee of the BCM Congress for this opportunity to present our work during these difficult times. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michiel. I'm looking at Q&A, but I'm not seeing any questions so far. So please, people, share your thoughts and ask Michiel what you want to know.
I had a question if there is no other one. Do you know if shared ventilator has been used in real patients? It has been published in the beginning of the first wave, the possibility to share ventilators. But do you know if it has been applied on real patients?
Yeah, indeed. So the group in New York from Breitler, they used shared ventilation in New York at the first wave in the end of March and the beginning of April, and they did 3 pairs of patients and they ventilate them for 24 hours. But they use the concept of Tonetti and they have to pair the patients. So in a large center, it's possible to ventilate 2 patients with 1 ventilator. But as I mentioned in the presentation, it's very difficult because patients are improving or getting worse in time, and you have to match the patients. So the patients have to be the same lung compliance. Otherwise, we can induce a ventilator-induced lung injury. So it's very hard and very difficult. And it's important to understand that shared ventilation, I prefer to call it shared ventilation and not splitted ventilation, because splitted ventilation is too plastic. It's not just split a tubing of a ventilator circuit. It's sharing a ventilator. It's hard, it's difficult. And that's why we want to further investigate this in a clinical trial and to develop a protocol to guide the physicians on the ICU and on the emergency department who are facing a ventilator surge capacity problem.
Michiel, Frank Dont asked if the main problem now was ICU staffing. So related to this subject, what is the impact of your construction on the ICU staffing? Do they have to take special considerations or frequent controls?
Yeah, indeed, it's a very important question. So when we decide to share a ventilator, it's indeed very important that the staff who will be taking care of the patients are fully informed about what's going on. That's also why I explained I prefer to call it shared ventilation, because it looks simple but isn't that simple. And the protocol that is now been published by Breitler is that you have to you sedate the patient very well, and also use curare. So weaning is not possible, and you take blood gases unless within 1 or 2 hours to see if your ventilation is going well. But that's also a very difficult and very hard aspect of sharing a ventilator, that if the patient improves or the patients get worse, you have to turn around with the patient to another ventilator, because you have to repair the patient. And with our circuit, you can adapt the ventilator circuit, and you can just let the patients who initially shared 1 ventilator, you can let them share 1 ventilator. So that's also for the staff, it's really an improvement to take care of those patients.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to co-moderate this session with Sabine one more time. As previous year, we were afraid that we couldn't get enough abstract for this session because of the pandemic, and we are very happy that scientific work could go on despite our other jobs. Thank you for everybody.
The jury has one last task, is finding the winning abstract, which will then be revealed at the end of this session. So you have a bit of time, Mark and Sabine, to discuss this together. We move forward before going to the last part with the keynote lecture of Jean-Bernard Gillet and the panel discussion. We shortly need to present you as a society, which we also did last year, the results of what we did in the past year. And I will quickly go through it because this is in a way the General Assembly of BZTeam as a society. My slide last year was 2019 was complex. Well, for many different reasons. 2020 is at least as complex as was 2019. Let's see if I can move slides here. Why is it not moving? There you go. That will be better. It might be a little bit small. Our financial situation has changed a bit, but not impressively. We, of course, had a Congress in the different years, and part of the cost of investing this platform is in these figures, but this is reimbursed, of course, with what comes in after January 2021. So essentially, we are, I think, a healthy society with definitely still some reserves to invest in the future. And I think, and that's what we agreed as board, we need to invest. You might think, why is the website so quickly changed? There was a new website a few years ago, but we are definitely aiming to come with a platform that not only is unidirectional, giving information, but now, and the first step was the new Congress, but also in the future, much more should be a platform for interaction, providing information, but getting information back from all of you. So we hope with the new website that we have made a framework for doing so. And that was our first investment. This said, so we spent in 2020 around 44,000 euro, mostly before the website and the Congress, also including the Congress of 2020. And we had an income of 33,000. Which is a bit less, but of course, the part of the income from this Congress is still in January to become. We already anticipated last year that we have a very small elected board, but wanted to open it up to people from different societies, different backgrounds, so that we have a working group that is far larger. I've written the names there, but there's definitely still place for people who want to participate in this, so we can make it a very lively society, and maybe this Congress can be a first step. This also means, and it is important to tell you, that our current statutes as a VZW ASBL are not adapted to neither the new legislation, but also not to the fact that our reality as an open organization, including the young doctors, including our role towards USM, is no longer a reality. We will take 2021 as a board, as an enlarged board, and you're all invited to work towards new statutes that can be implemented then in the Congress of next year, where we have our next General Assembly. And then, as it is, I'll have to ask you, and I'll put it in the poll, because normally spoken, this is something we just ask in person. Do you agree with these numbers and give lenience. I do not know if this is the correct English word, but I couldn't find another word in this short notice to the board for the year 2020. Or do you have a comment to make? And if such, I'll ask for you to make that comment in the Q&A. Very well. There's about 9% abstaining, but all the rest are in favor. I guess this is sufficient to move forward and have these practicalities behind ourselves. So, and then we move into the second part, and I'm very happy. I'm very curious as well of how this will evolve. We first have Jean-Bernard Gillet as chair of the National Council for Emergency Medicine, the Belgian National Council, who on the one hand did a review of the COVID the response in this first wave from the emergency medicine perspective, but also had a memorandum to the government with the start of the new government that also tackled the future of emergency medicine as viewed by this National Council. Jean-Bernard, I'll give you the word because this then also can lead up later on to the discussion with the panel.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Can you activate the presentation you received, or you didn't?
Yes, I can do that. Just give me a minute.
I have a dream that that in the future, everybody around the emergency medicine will be able to understand each other in their mother language, even in French, even in Dutch, or even in English. So because all the works we did within the National Council were done in both languages, I will present it either in French, either in English, either in Dutch. It's, as you know, the National Council is in charge of giving advice to the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Interior Affairs over the organization of emergency medical system in Belgium, which means that due to the weight, the task of the National Council is essentially focused on pre-hospital care. Et donc, je vais vous présenter ce qui est fait chaque fois que le Conseil est confronté à un changement de gouvernement par les élections. Nous organisons une consultation pour déterminer quelles sont les priorités que le prochain gouvernement doit considérer afin de soutenir les efforts d'amélioration que le Conseil national recommande. Et je ne sais pas si je peux moi-même... Is het mogelijk dat ik zelf de dia's laat verder gaan?
We moeten gewoon ja zeggen, want ze zitten natuurlijk nu onder mijn controle.
Oké, ja, de volgende alsjeblieft. Ja.
Oké.
Et donc, la précédente, donc, comment faisons-nous les recommandations vers le ministre? Eh bien, le Conseil est invité, chaque membre, chaque organisation membre du Conseil dont vous avez la liste sous les yeux, est invité à donner 25 sujets, 25 items qu'il considère comme importants et qui devraient être traités en priorité par le prochain gouvernement. Ça, c'est la première étape. Et la deuxième étape, c'est qu'on procède par un vote lors d'une assemblée plénière du Conseil. Et chaque membre du Conseil, chaque organisation membre a 10 voix qu'il peut répartir soit sur un seul sujet, soit sur 10 sujets différents. Et donc, on obtient à la fin de cet exercice une pondération de la priorité qui est accordée par l'ensemble du Conseil sur les sujets à traiter dans la prochaine législature. Cet exercice avait été fait juste avant les élections. Personne n'ignore qu'il a fallu un certain temps pour obtenir un gouvernement. Et donc, ce gouvernement ayant été constitué, le mémorandum a été remis au ministre Van den Broek, qui a donc accepté de les examiner et il a promis de venir présenter sa vision à la prochaine réunion du Conseil national qui se tient le 18 février prochain. Volgende slide. Welke zijn de aanbevelingen van de National Council? De eerste is programmatie en erkenning van de middelen van de dringend geneeskundige hulpverlening. Ziekenwagens, Piet, Mug, EMS, helikopters met verschillende SLA's. En dat is een belangrijk aspect, omdat u weet bijvoorbeeld dat als unig voorbeeld, Piet-experiment blijft een experiment en is nog niet als een volwaardige middelen van de DGA erkend. En dat is niet meer aanvaardbaar. We vragen dat een programmatie en een erkenning KB komt voor een betere visie van de toekomst en van de plaats van deze middelen binnen dringend geneeskundige hulpverlening. Een tweede punt, versterken het financieringssysteem van de ziekenwagen met kwaliteits- en prestatieindicatoren. Dat is een vrij belangrijk aspect. We vragen niet alleen een extra financieringssysteem, maar tegelijkertijd een systeem van evaluatie van de kwaliteit en van de prestatie met indicatoren die moeten vastgesteld worden. Derde punt is rampehulpverlening en haar financiering. We waren toen in 2019, er was geen sprake van een pandemie. En we moeten eerlijk zeggen dat niemand binnen de Nationale Raad had gesproken over het perspectief van een pandémie. Et je pense que c'est quand même aussi un exercice d'humilité de reconnaître que malgré que dans certains cercles internationaux, on attirait l'attention sur la possibilité d'une pandémie, en tout cas au sein du Conseil national, mais je pense à peu près partout en Belgique, personne n'a attiré l'attention sur le danger de cette catastrophe. Néanmoins, nous continuons à plaider pour que les moyens de l'aide médicale urgente soient renforcés en matière de logistique, et on a vu à quel point c'était important, et en traçabilité des patients, doivent être renforcés, y compris au niveau des centres 112 et 1733. Volgende slide, diapositive suivante. La gestion des appels au 112 et au 1733 doit être programmée avec l'aide d'un protocole de triage pour ces appels téléphoniques. Et ce travail a été fait au sein du Conseil en collaboration avec les médecins généralistes, les médecins spécialistes tant du Nord que du Sud. Mais ces protocoles qui ont été approuvés par la ministre doivent maintenant faire l'objet d'un suivi par un comité d'accompagnement et être accompagnés d'un travail de benchmarking au niveau international. Point suivant, het aantal van 112 callcenters en het beheer ervan moet worden gestroomlijnd met een risicoanalyse en een procedure voor in het geval van een storing. Dat is al gebeurd in Luik, vrij recent in provincie Luxemburg. Het is ongelooflijk gevaarlijk en we moeten zeker zijn dat een duidelijke risicoanalyse vermijdt dat in de toekomst zo'n toestand opnieuw valt. Dat maakt dat oproepen voor hartinfarct, voor CVA's enzovoort onmogelijk wordt of wordt vertraagd. De burger moet ook in staat zijn om digitale gegevens door te sturen om het meest geschikte antwoord mogelijk te maken. En dat is een lange vraag van de Nationale Raad, al 2 legislaturen, maar dat blijft nog niet mogelijk en dat is niet meer aanvaardbaar, zeker en vast indien men kijkt naar internationale oefening van andere landen waar dat mogelijk is. Recommandation suivante, diapositief suivante. Nieuwe beroepen moeten worden opgenomen in de wet op de uitoefening van beroep in de gezondheidszorg. En we spreken hier voor een aantal voorstellen die al lang ook binnen de Nationale Raad gebeurd zijn. En eerst van die voorbeeld is de medische dispatcher, de mensen die antwoord aan die 112 en 1733 oproepen, moet nu een duidelijke statuut krijgen met een definitie van wat mogelijk en wat niet mogelijk voor hen is. Point suivant, dans le respect du principe only once, la collecte des données au sein de l'AMU doit être rationalisée. Chacun sait qu'on enregistre des données au niveau des SMUR, on enregistre des données au niveau des PIT, au niveau des ambulances. Il existe des données qui sont enregistrées au niveau des centres 112, 1733. Le Conseil plaide pour que, dans la mesure du possible, et c'est une probabilité que l'on puisse arriver à une telle solution, une fois qu'une donnée est enregistrée dans un maillon de la chaîne, elle doit pouvoir être disponible pour tous les maillons de la chaîne. Enfin, le public doit être sensibilisé au fonctionnement et à l'utilisation correcte des ressources relatives aux soins d'urgence, donc les soins non planifiables. Il y a un évident travail d'information et de communication à faire pour mieux informer et orienter le patient qui a besoin de soins aigus. Et enfin, le fonctionnement et la composition du Conseil national de l'aide médicale urgente doit être optimalisé. Il y a un certain nombre de propositions qui existent ou de demandes de participation d'organisations qui doivent être prises en compte et qui doivent être intégrées dans un nouveau KB fixant un renouvellement de la composition du Conseil national et des membres qui y participent. Voilà l'essentiel, les 10 recommandations principales qui ont été faites donc par le Conseil national et que le Conseil national a demandé à l'administration de porter à la connaissance du ministre, ce qu'il m'a été donné l'occasion de faire il y a un mois. Et donc, je pense que ça fera l'objet d'un examen attentif par le ministre qui devrait pouvoir donner sa position sur ces différents points. Je pense que c'est la première partie. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions ou bien on laisse les questions pour la fin? Je propose qu'alors qu'on passe éventuellement à la deuxième partie, Diapositive suivante. Patrick. La deuxième partie est le résultat d'une enquête qu'on a menée au sein du Conseil national pour comprendre quelle a été l'expérience des différents membres du Conseil national face à la première vague, j'insiste, face à la première vague de la pandémie de mars à juin 2020. Et donc, à chaque organisation membre du Conseil, il a été envoyé un questionnaire ouvert, diapositive suivante, un questionnaire ouvert pour examiner quel était le vécu personnel des différentes organisations, quels étaient les principaux problèmes et de difficultés, les principales sources de difficultés, ainsi que les motifs éventuels de satisfaction, et les priorités d'action pour améliorer l'aide médicale urgente en situation de pandémie. Je rappelle donc bien qu'on est dans le cadre du Conseil national de l'aide médicale urgente, que par la loi, sa compétence va de l'appel au secours jusqu'à l'arrivée à l'hôpital. Et donc, nous ne sommes pas concentrés sur les autres aspects de la gestion pandémique. 19 des 21 organisations qui composent le Conseil ont donné une réponse au questionnaire et ce sont ces résultats que je vais vous donner. Diapositive suivante. Persoonlijke ervaring met de crisis. De persoonlijke gevoelens van de actorenleden van de Raad kunnen worden gegroepeerd in 3 items die in bijna alle antwoorden worden genoemd. Vermoeidheid, frustratie en trots. Door het feit dat het een open questionnaire was, het is vrij interessant en merkwaardig dat die 3 woorden in bijna alle antwoorden worden vermeld. Vermoeidheid als de eerste, frustratie als de tweede en trots als de derde. En ik vind dat belangrijk. Indien men eventueel zo'n oefening willen begint voor de eventuele derde golf, indien een derde golf komt, vrees ik dat de trots waarschijnlijk zal misschien een beetje verschillend zijn, maar het is voor mij vrij belangrijk dat die 3 aspecten worden vermeld. Diapositive suivante. Welke zijn de voornamelijke problemen? Gebrek aan beschermingsmiddelen, le manque d'équipement et de protection, les masques, les blouses, les gels. Ça a été une source incroyable de difficultés et d'angoisse pour ceux qui étaient confrontés à la prise en charge des patients à domicile ou sur la voie publique, mais principalement à domicile, et qui devaient les transporter et qui devaient ensuite rendre les moyens de transport à nouveau décontaminés. Cette difficulté a été mentionnée comme la plus importante des difficultés de la première vague. La deuxième difficulté, c'est le manque d'un plan pandémie au niveau fédéral. Les différents niveaux de pouvoir ont été mis en difficulté de coordination, et on le verra plus tard, mais ils ont été surtout sans aucune préparation, ce qui fait que le sentiment du terrain de l'aide médicale urgente a été que l'on a navigué à vue sans véritablement de plan concerté. En ten derde, ten slot worden tekortkomingen in de 3 K's, commando, concertatie en communicatie, zoals zeer systematisch gezien in de verschillende rampen, maar tegelijkertijd, het heeft een zeer lange tijd geduurd voordat men kreeg een vorm van commando en concertatie, en dat is een vrij belangrijk probleem geweest. En dat, il y a d'autres problèmes à côté de ces trois problèmes principaux, volgende dias. Le rapportage en temps réel, le fait de devoir donner soit toutes les semaines, soit tous les jours, la situation exacte des différents intervenants a été jugé difficile, principalement par défaut de définition des données qui étaient enregistrées. À partir du moment où les données enregistrées n'étaient pas clairement définies, il y avait de grandes difficultés pour le terrain à faire remonter l'information. Le rapport entre l'aide médicale urgente et le transport médico-sanitaire, qui dépendent de deux autorités différentes, l'aide médicale urgente étant sous l'autorité fédérale et les transports médico-sanitaires sous l'autorité des régions, a rendu les collaborations complexes, pour ne pas dire difficiles et parfois conflictuelles. Troisième point, c'est la gestion des appels 1733 et 112. Il y a là, dans les différents rapports et les différentes réponses des intervenants, des réponses contrastées. Certains ont manifestement été dans des provinces où la gestion des appels 1733 et 112 était bien coordonnée sous une direction médicale claire avec une collaboration des médecins généralistes. Il y a d'autres provinces où cette collaboration a été beaucoup plus complexe, peut-être aussi parce que le déploiement du système 1733 était différent. Dan de publicatie van de ethische codes. Sommige medische en wetenschappelijke verenigingen hebben ethische code aanbevelingen gepubliceerd over levenseinde en therapeutische prioriteit. We hebben dus straks gezien dat het een vrij belangrijke en vrij moeilijke oefening was, maar dat heeft ook een vorm van onzekerheid gecreëerd bij sommige intervenanten. Verdeling van de ernstige patiënten naar de beschikbare plaatsen. Het is ook voornamelijk in de eerste fase van de eerste golf een vrij belangrijk probleem geweest is. Maar daar zijn vanuit de overheid enkele initiatieven genomen die vrij geapprecieerd werden. Diapositief suivant, volgende dias. Redenen voor tevredenheid. De horizontale samenwerking. Dat is een vrij unaniem gevoel, zeker en vast in de eerste fase, dat de verschillende beroepen die werken samen in de dringende medische hulpverlening, ambulanciers, verpleegkundigen, artsen, huisartsen, maar ook specialisten, urgentiearts. Daar is een duidelijke perceptie geweest dat iedereen was vrij positief over horizontaal initiatief in geval van gebrek van duidelijk verticale instructies. Een collectieve bereidwilligheid met de erkenning ervan door de publiek was een vrij geapprecieerde situatie. Hospital Surge Capacity en Transport, ik heb dat straks gezegd, ja, het is ook een vrij goed initiatief geweest en dat heeft waarschijnlijk in sommige provincies vrij positieve samenwerking gecreëerd. Et alors, le développement des moyens de télécommunication, le coup de pouce, le turbo qui a été donné aux consultations par moyen digital a été perçu comme un effet secondaire indirect extrêmement favorable de la crise. Enfin, la dernière diapositive ou l'avant-dernière diapositive, la dernière diapositive, quelles sont les mesures prioritaires à entreprendre, à prendre pour améliorer le fonctionnement de l'aide médicale urgente en cas de pandémie ou en cas d'autres crises majeures. La clarification du cadre hiérarchique et des responsabilités. Qui fait quoi et quand? Ça reste une évidence que là-dessus, la complexité du système institutionnel créé par la 6e réforme de l'État a été extrêmement pénible à vivre pour les intervenants sur le terrain. Et donc, il est demandé que soit réfléchi au calme comment peut-on améliorer le fonctionnement hiérarchique et la définition des responsabilités. Beaucoup de provinces ont vu se développer des solutions ad hoc, certains autour du gouverneur, d'autres autour d'autres structures, des réseaux, mais une clarification est absolument nécessaire. Un plan fédéral pandémie devrait être élaboré, qui prévoit les risques, les missions, les moyens, les procédures et les instructions. Ce plan fédéral pandémie, si la pandémie continue ou si d'autres pandémies s'annoncent, devrait absolument devoir être mis en œuvre. Vrij belangrijk is ook een vraag naar een financiële kader om de functionele duurzaamheid van de gezondheidsstructuur in de context van de pandemie te garanderen. Dat is, er zijn heel wat probleem geweest met onzekerheid over wie betaalt wat ik nu doe maar. En dan zijn er bijvoorbeeld een aantal ziekenhuisdiensten, ambulancediensten in de probleem geweest en zullen in de probleem zijn. En er is een duidelijke vraag naar een betere financiële kader. Vervoer van de kwetsbare patiënt tussen de ziekenhuis, wie doet dat, hoe moeten we dat doen? Is dat een opdracht voor de dringend medische hulpverlening? Dit blijft een vraag. De rapportage, zoals al vermeld, is een vrij belangrijk aspect om real-time toestand te bekijken en een meting van de werklast voor de verschillende actoren moet op het punt gesteld worden. Dat zijn de voornamelijk, en ik denk dat het mijn laatste dia was, dat zijn de belangrijke conclusie van de Nationale Raad rond pandemie. Zijn er vragen daarover?
Mag ik misschien, sowieso kan iedereen nog in de Q&A ook vragen zetten. Mag ik ondertussen het panel van de slotdiscussie, die hier dan toch op aansluit, and I'll switch to English so that I don't have to. So can I ask the panel to join the discussion? I'll then quickly introduce them. And I'll ask. There you go. So our illustrious, that word is invented for this sort of thing. Our illustrious panel consists first of all of Jean-Bernard Gillet as chair of the National Council, but we also have Alexander Gijssen, who you know is the chair of the BCDIM, Jan Stroobans as chair of the Professional Society of Emergency Medicine, BSEP, Steve Doker from Ghent, representing the emergency nurses, VVVS and AFU, and Mr. Jan Bertels, who is a member of parliament, and Steve, chief of staff, no longer member of parliament, sorry. sorry, the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Health, Frank van den Broeke. My first question to the panel, and I'll try to keep open also the Q&A, so that if there come questions from the public. Before I've made a few rather strong, maybe a bit black and white questions for you and the public to answer, but before moving to that, I just wondered if you have any specific comments or things to add to what was the conclusions of the National Council. I think you can all unmute.
Yes, Patrick. If I may say so, as being the president of BASIS, the professional organization, I think we had a big opportunity to show the public, to show the country how straightforward we can be in organizing unexpected circumstances in a medical way. So with our education in mass emergency medicine, in this kind of specialization, I think most emergency physicians were practically involved in the organization of the hospitals, and not only of the hospitals, but also in the whole pre-hospital settings, testing villages, now vaccination villages, and so on. So I think that most emergency physicians proved the benefit of emergency medicine also in these kind of situations. Although we didn't have a pandemic plan in our country, I think most emergency physicians and emergency nurses showed their strength, and I think for our discipline it will be a good thing after this to discuss the real value of emergency medicine, what we did, and I'm very proud of all they achieved. And in that way, I also think that it's important that there should be a reorganization of the National Council, that also the professional organization can be a part of it in the discussion. Because when I see that the priorities were brought by voting, 10 points per organization, maybe the priorities or the nuances in some priorities might have been different from that kind of view. So we don't have to set up the discussion now, but I think within perspective of what we did so far and what the opportunities are for the future, I think we really have to redo this the discussion, redo this exercise.
Thanks. Jan?
Yeah, should I do it in English, in French, or in Dutch, or in English?
Preferably in English, otherwise we'll have to switch too much between languages.
No, okay, no problem. I'm going to say three things. First, but as all people already did, I suppose, my minister wants to express his gratitude, his thanks to all people who are still working in this pandemic situation. I think all medical people, they prove, and so I'm going to make the bridge to my second point, they prove what they are worth for our society. We are still working with our society because all medical personnel in general are saving our society for the moment. That brings me to my second point. That's I agree with Jan and with others, also with Jean Bernard, who we already met before, as he told. Yeah, there is a moment of opportunities, and we should take, all of us, the moment of opportunities. The emergency medicine has proven and proves what's worth, and we should take the opportunity to reform what's needed. But in that sense, that I think there's should be a reform, should be improvements for sure, but make sure we take the opportunity. I'm going to be very pragmatic now. Don't start a discussion for a big reform, an ideal reform that will need in time of execution, for 10 years. We have to reform, but for sure we have to be radical in the operationalization of it. So we should do it now. And that's where also John Bernard Gillet told already, my minister is ready to discuss, to give our ideas on the basis of our recommendations, what should be done to reinforcement, the reform of the landscape, hospital reforming, but also the reform of the landscape and the cooperation, the transversal cooperation between all disciplines in medicines. And three, and that will be probably more controversial, we should, the third point, we should do it together, all of us. So don't, it's a little bit black or white. It's not that black or white in the reality, but please make sure that we don't lose our time in procedural discussions amongst us. But let's move forward all together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've put up a question in the meantime, which links to what was already said about the real value of emergency physicians and nurses. The statement was every nurse/physician is not an ED nurse physician, and every ED nurse physician is not necessarily a PIT or SMU nurse physician. As a statement, majority seem to agree. I don't know if the panel has any ideas about this. Steve?
Well, of course I agree, and I'm glad that most of the respondents agree. What keeps astonishing me is that we, at this point, from the ED nurse point of view, we do not see that agreement translate itself in actual acts. In one of the sessions this afternoon, we already mentioned that there is the education, the continued education of the specialized ED nurses is a burning question, and there is not yet a real answer. And I'm happy that Dr. Stroobans also said, as a team, we have proven that EDs are very versatile. They can be flexible, and I think we have to make sure that in the future this can continue. So we have to define and secure those roles for the future. And that's something that's a big concern, because in the past, my understanding is that the idea of creating universal soldiers applicable in any ward where they would be needed was kind of the concept. We will make a general nurse, and they can be put anywhere. I think if COVID has proven anything, that it's very difficult to get the right profile of people, and to get enough manpower to tackle such a pandemic has proven, I think, not to be the problem of ventilators, but to be the problem of manning teams to supervise the patients being ventilated.
I totally agree, Steve. It didn't surprise me emergency medicine is not a conglomerate of skills, but it's more an attitude towards medicine, towards society. And what we experienced last months together, physicians, nurses, and all the personnel working in this kind of biotope with high resiliency, supporting first line, supporting the hospital. I think that this makes us unique, and I think when we can offer this biotope to the society, to the government, to create new things based on what we've seen right here. I totally agree with Jan that this is an opportunity for reform, for doing things better now, because within 2 years after, within 2 years, nobody will remember what we did and how we did it, and will not see anymore the need for preparing for new unexpected situations and reacting to unexpected situations. That's what we're good in. So, and if we can offer this experience towards the society, I think nobody will say or will think that is not our job, or not our experience, or not our added value. So I remember, Jan, we will take opportunity of this in the next weeks.
It's an invitation.
Sasha, you were going to?
Yeah, I just wanted to give my opinion as an educator mainly, because I'm also a teacher and I have students in medicine and also nurses in the critical care area. And we should remember what was our situation before the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, in France or even in Belgium. What I've seen these last years is that people had the same motivation, and the training is better, and we have better and better emergency physicians and emergency nurses. And although last year there wasn't so much candidates for to being a nurse in the emergency department or to work there, and I feel that it's not only about the specifics of the team in the emergency department is really something you can find it anywhere else. And I think that the education is also part of these teams are trained to work together. They speak the same language, they have the same training, and this is known for so many years with the MET teams and them team steps, and those people has been trained like that. And what surprised me during the crisis is that emergency physician has, in many hospitals, played a major role in the crisis management for the entire hospital. And we were the only one that has been trained before for that. And it's not always easy to adapt every day to new rules. It's not easy to expect the unexpected, even though we all know that we must anticipate and plan, and there's no plan. So, and it's quite logical that there was no plan, because nothing like that had happened in our country before. So my opinion about that is, I feel that this is paradoxical, this crisis, because it has been so hard for us. I mean, physically, emotionally, psychologically, kind of something. And on the counterpart of it, I have never seen such a teamwork, a team building effort. And this is strengthened our links together the emergency department team. And I think that we have value and that we have to motivate our candidates. This is very important. What I've seen also, and it's an important thing, is that due to the massive flood of patients in the hospital, once for many years, we had come to decide that we should take into account these unexpected patients in the emergency department. So this is the first time in my hospital and in many hospitals that I've seen plans to see what incoming patients should come. And I think that there should be a reflection about, the scheduled disease and the unscheduled disease. And in many emergency departments, we were happy because everything that we can do, we have been able to do at the best level. So this is a reflection that goes far beyond the simple thing that we have to have a reflection about the plan. We also have to have a reflection about the unscheduled care and how the emergency physician, emergency nurses have been working these last 10 years in horrible conditions, underpaid. And this is something that we should take into account, in my opinion, because education is not the only thing. You can educate them, motivate them, they want to work. And well, I feel that these last 5 years, it has been so difficult for my emergency physician and nurses. And I have often been ashamed because I started in the emergency department. It was my first year in internal medicine, and it's almost 30 years ago. And it was harder, but the conditions were better. So something must be done, I think.
Thanks, Sasha. You mentioned unplanned care, and Jean-Bernard already talked about, especially during COVID, how one of the things that went well was the horizontal working. So I put up the question: emergency departments is a black and white question, need to evolve to centers for unplanned care, which definitely gave both people totally agreeing to definitely also a few people disagreeing about this evolution that in some centers is already happening while we speak, but this is an evolution for all, I wonder.
I think what this crisis made very clear for me, the time of echelons, who does what, where and when, strictly with barriers, is over. It doesn't work. It's outdated totally. The way we work together with general physicians, with other specialists, with everybody, with people from politics, who cares? So working together was the way for success, was the way to survive. And when I saw the third word in the presentation of Jean-Bernard, was proud. Definitely there was proud. But actually, and I speak for myself, happiness was the fourth word that we achieved to do the job, to build the bridges with other departments, whatever. Although we were very tired, it gave me a feeling of gratitude and joy, and that's how our Biotope works. I think the joy of the success of a team is more intense than the joy of a solo sportsman.
If I can tap into the question about the Centers for Unplanned Care, there is kind of a logic to clustering people coming to a hospital without a plan, without a scheduled appointment, or even without knowing 1 hour in advance that they would need the hospital. And it goes beyond the ED itself. It's about marking of entrances. It's about staff being able to host those people and pulling them into your system. And I think that's already happening today. You get people in the ED who want to have an appointment with a cardiologist. Next appointment is in 3 weeks. They don't feel confident waiting so long, so they arrive at the ED, and we can be happy or not about that evolution, but it's something that's already happening. And I think the collaboration has been very clear in this pandemic, but it's perhaps also transposable to the normal way of working. The ED in many ways buys time for the other healthcare professionals to plan the unplanned patient in their activities, and I think that's a very important step. It's also a nice place to be. It makes us proud as an ED, but in many ways we buy the time for other parts in the hospital to plan seeing or hosting this patient.
Mm-hmm. Now the centers for unplanned care in the idea, as it is also in other countries, incorporate the general practitioner on-call functionality in a 24/7 way, so that people do not have to decide themselves whether I need to go to the general practitioner or need to go to the ED or wait till Monday. It's the complete package then. They can get at that same spot and be given at the right time the right care they need. That's the idea. I don't know if it's a feasible idea. That's for the panel.
I think a country that gives an answer to every citizen who has a question. I feel very sick at this moment. What's happening with me? When a country can give a solution for that, a simple solution, not too complicated, every hour of the day, I think that is a very developed country. Yeah. And it doesn't start with who will do what at what time. It starts with where can I go to find a solution, and to find on that spot the people who will take care of me. I think that's the task for the next years.
Jan?
Yeah, I think one of the goals we have to set, and one of the departing points will be, it should be patient-oriented. And then I agree again with Jan, patient-oriented, it means that the patient, the people who are feeling sick or think they are sick, they should know where to go. And I don't agree, my personal opinion, I don't agree to say we are going to create, again, silos. You have to go for X. For that kind of sickness, you have to go there. For the other one, you have to go there. No, we have an evolution in our country, and I think it's a good one, that what we call, well, I'm looking for the word in English, the huisartsenwachtposten, the point de garde pour les general practitioners, that they are collaborating with the hospitals nearby. In different hospitals, they are now looking for places that the general practitioners can work inside the hospital, very, again, black and white. That's a good thing, because the cooperation, the collaboration that we are all proud of, we should keep that. We should not do we shouldn't go the other way, according to me.
Yeah, indeed, collaboration means working together and not next to each other.
Yeah.
So, and I hope that this crisis proved that we can work together as colleagues for the same goal.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's not only a spot. The solution is not only a spot. Even two structures such as GP and emergency department beside, collaboration means also the possibilities we have seen working very well during the crisis. It's also digital collaboration. And there is quite a lot of possibilities we have to look at. because otherwise, if we ask only the people to move from their home or their public place to a spot, it is the spot, the emergency department of the huisartsenwachtpost, I don't care. This is not for me the only solution, especially for quite a lot of patients who are better treated at home in other contexts than the hospital. So this aspect should be carefully looked at before giving just one answer. You have to move to one spot.
But the digitalization and the transferring of information between each other,
yeah,
it's a part of it. Huh? It's a big part of it. Huh?
Well,
Sorry, I interrupted.
No problem. May I contribute something?
Yeah, absolutely, Sabine.
Yeah, because that's a really important thing that you added.
Okay.
That the chart, the medical chart, the medical information should be available for every healthcare partner. And we have some hiccups with that now. We see that HUP, COSO, and whatever is trying to centralize already a lot of information, but it's not everything. And that will be, if we want to go digital, this will be a really important thing to emphasize for the near future.
Let's avoid that we are going to create some digital platforms within hospital networks, for instance, that can't talk with each other. It's completely crazy. But I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm
please.
little...
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes.
But it's a big fight, eh? It's a big fight, eh?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And when I see how many hospitals are trying, they think that the medical file is their ownership. No, it's the patient's ownership, and it should be as open as possible to communicate with other care providers, whether they're in other hospitals or in out-of-hospital settings. We don't care. I think that is not only for the benefit of the patient, but also for the benefit of the state who has to pay everything. So the intelligence between actions should be straightforward. And the way it's constructed now, that some hospitals think that they have to be the owner of the medical file, I think it's completely wrong idea, and it's supported, of course, by software companies who would like to take advantage of this kind of construction. Yeah.
But give me support. We're going to fight against, but we will need support.
Yeah. Call me.
Maybe before moving to the next question, which actually links to what was said, I was quickly looking into the Q&A from the public, which talks about and the opinion of the panel about value-based healthcare. And as a guiding principle for the reorganizing. Are there ways of defining quality control mechanisms in what we do in emergency medicine?
No one is answering? It should be.
Might be a difficult question. Yeah?
It's a difficult question, but it should be. The quality should be a starting point and should be the end of it. And we have to look, and we will do it, to look for indicators, how we can measure quality, how we can measure outcome. But it will be a difficult exercise, but for sure it should be a goal in the improvements of the system.
I would say it's a very important point of the memorandum where people are asking for even being paid according to some quality indicators. It's the second point of the memorandum, and I think it's very important. Ambulances, PIT, MUG, SMUR, they are a clear demand of being evaluated by quality indicators and being paid according with those quality indicators. And I was very much surprised that so many people within the National Council were asking for such an exercise.
But we have a general law according to quality in medicine, eh? Fine.
Maybe I want to move on. We talked about the one side of the spectrum. There's another side of the spectrum. If we talk about collaboration and networking, hospitals are reorganizing themselves into networks. Not every hospital has all function and services, especially not given the hyper specialization of certain services. We had the cardiology, we might have the neurology, but there's, if you've seen the ECLS lecture from Lionel Lameau, but there are different other things that are not provided in each hospital, neurosurgery. Do we need to further distinguish and develop levels of emergency departments? We tried that in the past, and that was not a real success. I don't know what the future can bring.
To my opinion, it was a completely wrong idea. I think in the end, I totally agree. It's all about quality, which you achieve. And what we did was to organize it on based on type of hospitals or whatever. But now, since a few years, we're going into direction of networks, regional networks, and that should give the opportunity to find the best solution for a specific region to achieve the endpoints of quality. Yeah. And I think that there should be some space for creativity in different regions, because the needs and possibilities may differ very hard between two regions. And as I remember, the fights between hospitals in the earlier years, it was always based on the fact that someone couldn't achieve the goals or the norms or whatever. But if you see it from a regional perspective, I think most regions can achieve the goals of delivering good quality. And as they are organized now in networks, I think that this will give them a lot of opportunities to do it better together as colleagues, fighting for the same goal in the same region. And that should solve a lot of problems. I'm really convinced about it. But I hope that the government will go on in thinking in that direction, because the networks are created. Once there is another political view on how to organize healthcare, then we start from zero again. So everybody should stay convinced of working together in a specific region is the way to go, and to optimize healthcare, especially emergency healthcare.
Mm-hmm. In the government statements of our minister, one thing about EMS that is and emergency medicine that was clearly stated is the word adequate. So meaning that the patient needs to get the adequate care and going to the adequate ED. But who defines adequate? What is adequate? Especially if you think about super specialization. Is it possible to define it? And how are we going to do that?
It's a question to me, I suppose. Now I have to be prudent, because for adequate means, I'm going to put it the other way. That from the patient point of view, he should go to the hospital that can give him a treatment the most adequate possible. And that means, and I'm not avoiding the question, but I'm prudent, because otherwise I know that tomorrow there will be a fight. And that means it should be, that it doesn't mean it should be the hospital the most nearby. It should be the hospital that can deliver the most adequate treatment. And we should be aware, and that's also the thinking of the networks, or more, even on a higher level, that not each hospital can treat each disease on the same way. It's not possible to have, what should I say, if we are transferring 3,500 patients a year or something like that, when we are transferring them to 200 hospitals, 180, then you can be sure that some patients are not transferred by the smeur of the mug to the most adequate hospital. So we should think about it. But don't ask me now to say we are going to close some medical emergency departments in hospital X or Y. We are not going to do that way. It doesn't work that way. It should also be a collaboration. It can be everywhere, but we have to transfer.
Yeah. On that note, I agree that with the discussion before about the adequate care, everyone was scared of ending up with nothing. And that has been a big problem in the networking also. That's a discussion you feel in networking. It's, oh yeah, but if I network with a big hospital, I will end up in nothing. And I agree with Jan that that now is the time to look at networking in an open way, and to discuss what is needed to adequately treat a patient. And I think you will not be able to treat everything in every ED, but I think there's enough pathology to divide and to give everyone something to be proud of, and something to invest in that quality for that specific goal. So I think networking opens opportunities there. And that the indicators for what is adequate care should be investigated and put out there. I think that's very important.
I give you.
Yeah. I just wanted to say something. Yeah.
Work. At the moment, we are reorganizing the emergency departments in our city in a way that they become one big organization. And the success of my colleague in the north is also my success, and vice versa. And this will be a completely other way of looking at care, I think.
Sasha?
Yeah, I just wanted to add some comments on quality and quality indicators. And but I feel that, of course, networking and getting the right patient in the right place in the right moments is a good idea. But I feel that maybe we should be cautious about what we think about quality, and if we want to link, finance with quality. Because I feel, well, I am more concerned about the safety. And it's about the safety of the patient, but also the safety of the healthcare providers. So in my opinion, what has gone wrong these last 10 years is much more linked to the fact that we have been overwhelmed with a major increase of patient incoming, and it's not only patients who don't need our care, they do. And with a shortage in hospital beds and ICU beds, because in my opinion, this was a major issue during this crisis. There is no reservoir. We don't have any possibility. So the only thing that we could do when there were these floods of patients was say, okay, we will only take care of the what's urgent or not. And we already know that many patients have waited too long. And then it's the same for the number of ICU beds. I mean, I know that Germany has better finance that we have, but one problem that they didn't have is to have that reflection about, do we have to triage patient for the ICU? So I feel that there should also be a reflection about patient safety. Do we provide safety care to the patient? And is working in our emergency department safe for our emergency physician and nurses? Because for them, it's not safe, because you're going to ask them to increase quality. So to do something that they are not able to do because there's too much work, too much patient. So this is just trying to see it I feel that the move should more be, okay, we want you to succeed in achieving those goals. How can we help you achieve this? And I don't feel, well, I know my emergency department has for 20 years, 4% of increasing incoming every year. And so there should be reflection about the number of nurses that I need. And I feel that it's very difficult for them to say, okay, if you need to have quality. I feel that the quality of our emergency department is rather good. And so why don't we see it completely on the opposite? Say, how can you imagine that we could improve our healthcare system and to make it more safe and more qualitative? What do you need for that? Ask nurses, ask physicians that are working there, and I'm pretty sure that it will say some good things. Because there's plenty of things in the literature about that. And it's not about, well, if I can have more neurosurgical patient transferred here or there, because this is not the big part of the patients we have. It's almost elderly patients. So what do you think of it?
I absolutely agree, and I can say that from WWW's AVU, we have been exploring the requirements in EDs for the nursing factor, because if you look at legislation now, and there's a good base, but there's no information about how do you match that staffing to your number of patients, and even to your profile of patients, which is a whole different discussion. And I think the data is out there. We have been doing a lot of registration. I think the data really is there, but we should dare to discuss and to compare. That's also something very important. If we compare the staffing in the emergency departments that are affiliated with WWW's AVU, there's a very wide spectrum from ED members performing tasks at other parts of the hospital. Others have their own transportation system. They're all slight changes that really affect the workload of your ED teams. But I think that's just as important a quality issue as the time, as the door to needle time. I think that's a very important issue.
Okay. if we talked about staffing, what is definitely also impacting is the relation that emergency departments have with the pre-hospital environment, where teams are definitely being well used, and this has an impact on the amount of people on the ED platform for pre-hospital medical emergency care, which is a good thing, this link, I think. But I've put up a question. It's also was in the National Council memorandum, maybe not like it's written here, which is written more black and white, but as you know, the PIT paramedic intervention team, which is the third tier of a three-tier system, in the middle between the SMUR and the 112 ambulances. The question is, can we decrease the number of SMUR and ambulances by increasing in PITs? Is this a good idea? Whether or not by also having a HAMS backup. We currently have 2 projects which are also been pilot projects, what's in the word, for the last 10 years, as is the PIT. I wonder what you think about it and whether or not it's something that needs tackling now in this coming years or year even. I look at the panel.
Well, I think that we have to redo the exercise in the same way as we are recalculating the needs within a region based upon networks. We did a few experiments in our city with lowering the amount of emergency physicians, lowering the amount of emergency nurses in specific situations of pre-hospital care based on new technology like video conferencing, tele-support, and so on. And I think that it makes sense to rebuild our pre-hospital system based on the new modern opportunities, and within the same framework of collaboration on a regional base. I can imagine that the needs and possibilities within a region like Antwerp isn't the same like a region completely in the south of Belgium. So, but at the end, it should have the same effect for the patient. So we need creativity to achieve the same effect, the quality, to have the same quality. So, and that is not based on how many SMURs, how many PITs, how many this and how many that, but how do you organize pre-hospital care in a way that you have the right person at the right time for the right patient.
What I want to say about that is that I don't know if you have seen the lecture by Jochen Bergs from Aachen, and this is a really interesting topic, and he was sharing his experience with their system, and I feel that this is really what we should do. So if you haven't seen it, I feel that it has been recorded. This is really interesting. I feel that this is really what we have to do.
If I may, I want to add something too. I think this is a supra-regional thing we have to decide. It's not done at network level, because to be honest, I think networks are too small for that. We really have to look at added value. And as you already stated, Jan, it has to be the best care for the patient, but the best care for the patient can mean different things. In the south of the country, it means distance, it means access to the place where the patient may have fallen or may have his heart problem. In dense occupied regions, it is about access, but most of the time for shorter distances. So differences are there also, and the people, the team, should have an added value. These should be people that you can call to together with the SMUR, the PIT, and the ambulance team, have an additional medical background or material or other help to support the teams that are the ground teams.
Okay. I think we're almost at the end, because we also, and I know they're eagerly waiting, have to find the winner. And Sabine and Mark already joined us, the winner of the abstract session. I'm looking at each of the panelists to see if they have a closing statement for the future, EMS 2.0.
I have one. I would like to thank the panel, and I hope we can do the reforms we need to do. For instance, about the last topic, I didn't intervene, but the last topic we should do about the recognition and then the conditions of the pre-hospital care. But I hope, and I think we took a good start. I hope we could do it in a positive way, like with now. Collaboration and cooperation, that are the keywords. Also for the emergency department or emergency services 2.0, as you called it. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost 3.0. Huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other final comments? I don't see any. I have a quick look also at the Q&A if there's any burning. Maybe also, but this is not for restarting the discussion, but Michiel Stiers also highlighted the fact that there's a 4th tier in the EMS system. And actually this is the 5th if you incorporate the general practitioner into this story. The 4th or the 5th then would be the civilian. And I can tell you, Mark, who is probably still in the session, and some other people are indeed looking at first responders and physicians, how these fit into the whole spectrum of EMS. John Bernard, did you want to say anything? You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, I just will emphasize the need of a space to speak together and to listen to everybody, because it's very interesting when you listen to everybody, the possibilities of targeting together something which benefits for the patient is possible. And that's the message I have to bring from the National Council. When you speak together, within the work group, you are listening to the different point of view. It's perfectly possible to find a common agreement on certain things to do. And that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'm now looking at Sabine and Mark to reveal the winner. As it stands, all three will get a prize, and not surprisingly, looking at the red herring through our Congress, it's all about film tickets. Once COVID allows you to go back to the cinema, you'll get them. But the winner, Sabine and Mark, please make the announcement.
It was a very, very tough decision. Everybody did some very nice work. And yeah, we also took into account what was really relevant now, and they all three were. But in the end, we decided to go for the ethical triage in allocation of ICU resources. Yeah, so for everybody.
Bravo.
And
Thank
especially
you,
for you, Heidi.
there you go. This is the end of a very long day. Well, not the end, as it is obviously with a 5-minute break, and that should work out around 6:30. We will start with our just not a pub quiz, but something alike. You can do this as a team or individually. It's going to be great fun. You'll have to sort your own beers or wine or fruit juice or whatever you want. But we'd see each other again for the quiz, so we end the evening a bit more relaxed than the whole day. I thank the speakers. I thank the people working together to make this possible. I also thank our industry partners, because this is definitely not a logical thing that they join in this sort of meetings. So thank you very much as well. We'll go out with one last commercial, and then we see each other again for the quiz in like 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See just here.